The history of the Kashyyyk system involves not just the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk, but also another populated world, Trandosha, which is home to the reptilian Trandoshans, who had an often violent relationship with the neighboring Wookiees. In today's video, we'll be going over the history of both of these worlds in the Star Wars Legends continuity. Kashyyyk's orbit is described as perfectly circular, giving the planet one persistent season. As we see in Revenge of the Sith, Kashyyyk is covered with gigantic trees, beginning barely a kilometer away from most of its various beaches. The height of these trees, and therefore the arboreal evolution of the Wookiees, are indicated to have been influenced by the Rakatan Infinite Empire, a galaxy-spanning civilization of despotic force wielders who ruled most of the galaxy until around 25,000 BBY. Even the Wookiees' own legends tell the story of how not just the trees but the Wookiees themselves are strangers to the world, and owe their presence on Kashyyyk to the interference of the Rakatans. This can get a bit weird with the timeline. The overgrowth of the trees, called rochers, is attributed to a malfunction by a terraforming computer in the year 33,598 BBY, or before the Battle of Yavin, after it had already supposedly lost contact with the Rakatans. But we also know that around 3,000 years earlier, circa 36,000 BBY, a mysterious pyramid called a Tho-Yor existed on the world, protected for generations by Wookiee warriors among rocher trees, both looking exactly how we'd expect modern Wookiees and rochers to look. This isn't necessarily impossible to reconcile. The earliest dates of the Rakatan Infinite Empire are a bit more fudgeable, so we could assume they started the process of embiggening the trees and doing whatever relocation or genetic alterations to the Wookiees a bit earlier, with just the rochers getting even more wildly bigger when the malfunction happens. Either way though, this period of lore is always at least a bit messy. That Tho-Yor pyramid eventually opened up, revealing itself to be a spaceship, and took many of its protector Wookiees to the core planet Tython, where the Wookiees there met occupants of 7 other Tho-Yor. But this video is just about the Kashyyyk system, so those Wookiees are just gone from Kashyyyk now and we won't digress there too far. Wookiee civilization on Kashyyyk built up along a local tribal system, but it eventually came under a full planetary government with the capital emerging in Rukwaru. The Wookiees built their civilization in a network of tree houses, only venturing into the immensely dangerous lower levels called the Shadowlands for ritual purposes and rites of passage. Given how complicated it is to engineer a planet-wide network of tree houses ranging from personal dwellings to grand public concourses and halls, it shouldn't come as a surprise unless you're harboring anti-Wookiee prejudices in your heart that the species has an affinity for technology almost as strong as their affinity for nature. Another city, Tikyana, emerged as a major galactic tech hub, and over time as Wookiees became more integrated into galactic civilization, the city Kachiro became a center of hyperspatial engineering, with Wookiee scientists matching the likes of the Duros, the Given, and Celestians. We have less direct knowledge about early Trandoshan history, but as far as the planet itself goes, the trees in its various jungles are disappointingly normal-sized, with a variety of other biomes erring towards arid areas alongside the wet jungles and swamps. Despite the relatively high number of Trandoshans who make their way out into the galaxy, their planetary population is attributed as only being around 42 million by the time of the Empire, with the most major city being Hiskor, although they also do at some point colonize their moon, Waska, as well. By about 7,000 BBY, the Kashyyyk system was at least loosely associated with the Republic, although only Trandosha was known to be inhabited and therefore held representation in the Senate. The system was far from the galaxy's major hyperspace lanes, so it's unsurprising that Kashyyyk and Trandosha were outside the normal cares of the Senate. The Great Sith War of 3996 left the Republic heavily damaged, and the Circa Corporation stepped up to help with rebuilding. Because of their assistance towards the Republic, Circa was granted control over Kashyyyk, still officially believed by the Republic to be uninhabited by intelligent life, since its discovery a couple of decades earlier. This gets attributed to anti-Wookiee prejudice by Circa and others, as well as potentially Circa withholding some information about when they discovered the planet, rather than any actual familiarity with the planet or the Wookiee species. By the time of Revan's war with the Republic, from 3959 to 3956 BBY, Circa had renamed the planet, designated G5623 by themselves, to Dean. Despite their claims that there was no intelligent life on the planet, they started handing out slavers' rights to the population, most notably to the nearby Trandoshans, igniting a fierce rivalry between the two neighbors. One Wookiee chieftain's son, Chundar, began cooperating with the slavers, selling out hunters in the Shadowlands. His brother Zalbar discovered this and attacked Chundar with his claws, a major faux pas in Wookiee society, causing Zalbar to be exiled as a Mad Claw. Chundar was then able to oust his father Freyr and become chieftain himself, maintaining his relationship with Circa until the memoryless and reformed Jedi version of Darth Revan returned with Zalbar, exposing Chundar and restoring Zalbar's honor, ousting the local Circa office. Kashyyyk largely remained free of the fighting in the Mandalorian Wars and Jedi Civil War given the difficulty of the terrain, but after Revan and Malak's Sith were defeated with help from Revan himself, the Wookiees independently rose up and overthrew the Circa Corporation across the whole planet. Thanks to a reverse-engineered Trandoshan hyperdrive, the Wookiees were then able to finally take to the stars and reach out to the Republic on their own around this point. The rivalry between the Wookiees and the Trandoshans, marked by repeated attempts by Trandoshans to sell Wookiees into slavery, continued for millennia. But as the Wookiees became more integrated into the Republic, the balance of power quickly tipped in their favor. Republic anti-slavery laws finally officially protected them, and as the Republic Senate repeatedly reorganized towards sectoral rather than planetary representation, the home sector of the Trandoshans and Wookiees, Mytaranor, was then exclusively represented by Wookiee senators. I've done a whole breakdown of how senatorial representation worked and didn't work before, which I'll link in the description if you want to learn more about how that worked. I used some other examples in that video, but the dynamic of how all this representation was set up was likely very similar between Kashyyyk and Trandosha. The Kashyyyk system saw some fighting in the New Sith Wars from 2000 to 1000 BBY, where Kashyyyk, now firmly loyal to the Republic and especially Jedi, was captured by the Sith. On Trandosha, Trandoshan forces attacked both Sith and Republic encampments. A third planet in the system, the as-yet uninhabited Alaris Prime, also played host to Sith and Republic forces during the war. Eventually, the Sith were defeated and the war ended. Alaris Prime was alleged to have been lost and then rediscovered, but it's a planet within the same system, and the Wookiees were great at navigation, so it seems weird that they could lose a planet in their own system. But either way, it was rediscovered in 59 BBY, and by 36 BBY, Kashyyyk sought and was granted permission to colonize the planet from the Senate. The Trade Federation opposed this decision, wanting Alaris Prime for themselves, and secretly deployed droid armies to attack Chieftain Kashyyyk and Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, who was assisting the Wookiee colonization efforts. Once finally freed from the Trade Federation forces, Alaris Prime was led by the son of Kashyyyk, a Wookiee named Chewbacca, who probably doesn't go on to do anything else that's important. During this period leading up to the Clone Wars, relationships between the Wookiees and Trandoshans continued to sour as well. Diplomatic outreach had been underway, but a Wookiee ship was attacked over a Trandoshan moon, and in response the Wookiee fleet blockaded Trandosha. The following year, the Wookiees and Trandoshans returned to negotiations, but these negotiations fell apart once again when the Wookiees learned that the Trandoshans had sought Trade Federation support in petitioning the Senate for direct representation of Trandosha within the Senate. The Wookiees were unsurprisingly happy with the arrangement where the whole sector was just represented by Wookiee Senator Yarua. When the Clone Wars fully broke out, Trandosha remained in the Republic, but individual Trandoshans and Trandoshan organizations joined the CIS in significant numbers, once again hoping to engage in the Wookiee slave trade with the CIS's support. Despite Trandosha's alleged support for the Republic, the planet's government often funded these pro-CIS groups under the table. Even Kashyyyk's position, though, was not as exclusively pro-Republic as you might expect. The planet remained neutral in the conflict for the first year and a half, negotiating with the CIS and Republic for access to local hyperroutes known only to the Wookiees, despite invasions of Alaris Prime by the CIS. Grievous did attack the world repeatedly, hoping to cow them into submission, a plan which went about as well as you'd expect. The Wookiees don't love being attacked, surprisingly, and worst of all, Wookiee Prince Rakumi was accidentally killed by a battle droid, making King Grikshawa throw his full support behind the Republic. This is what finally prompted the full invasion of Kashyyyk by the CIS, which was ultimately repelled by the Republic and the Jedi. When Order 66 was executed, the Wookiees, up to and including powerful leaders and chieftains like Tarful and Chewbacca, attempted to shelter and assist what Jedi they could. This led to reprisals from the Empire, who were also engaged in enslaving Wookiee populations for labor on massive projects like the Death Star. Trandoshan hunters were officially employed to track down escaped Wookiees as well. The oppression of Kashyyyk continued until 5 ABY, when the New Republic fully liberated the planet. Wookiees had already been involved pretty heavily with the Rebel Alliance leadership long before that, though. By 4 ABY, Karithrar was a signatory to the Declaration of the Alliance of Free Planets, and he also signed on to the Declaration of the New Republic as Kashyyyk's representative. He remained the senator from Kashyyyk till at least 17 ABY, serving in multiple cabinets under Mon Mothma and Leia. By 25 ABY, he had been replaced by Senator Trebek. We kind of lose track of any major events with Trandosha, though it presumably fell into Kashyyyk's shadow as a member of the New Republic and then Galactic Alliance. Both were, luckily, among the few worlds to sneak by relatively unscathed in the devastating Yuuzhan Vong War. But 10 years later, in the 40s ABY, the Corellians and allied worlds began a rebellion against the Galactic Alliance, originally premised on not wanting to contribute to the mutual defense pool of the Galactic Alliance fleet. In response to this rebellion, the Galactic Alliance, now under the leadership of Darth Caedus, aka Jacen Solo, and Admiral Cha Niathal, grew increasingly authoritarian. Kashyyyk's leadership, although leaning towards supporting the Galactic Alliance due to their staunch loyalty, agreed to grant an audience to Han and Leia Solo, who were wanted by the Galactic Alliance at this point, and Luke Skywalker and the Jedi, who were deemed traitors as well. The Wookiees refused to allow Darth Caedus to come and apprehend the Jedi while they were under the Wookiees' protection, so Jacen had the Galactic Alliance fleet begin firebombing the world. Jacen believed this would either force the Confederacy to reveal they didn't actually care about the fate of their potential allies, or if they did want to help defend Kashyyyk, they would have to pull their fleets away from attacks on other important core worlds like Kuat. The Jedi and Confederation forces ultimately did unite to defend the planet, although the Wookiees then pledged their allegiance to the Jedi directly, rather than joining the Confederacy, creating a third party in what had been a two-belligerent war so far. Albeit this was a party which remained technically neutral to softly align with the Confederacy forces, united by the goal of deposing Jacen Solo in the hopes of then negotiating an end to the war. During this era, we also get our first look at some homegrown Wookiee fighters, like the Owul Interceptor. This is likely only one of several ship classes made directly by the Wookiees for their own home defense fleet. Ultimately, the Jedi Coalition was successful in unseating Jacen Solo, and Kashyyyk was brought fully back into the Galactic Alliance fold, though the planet was heavily scarred by the inferno inflicted by Caedus. Nearly 100 years later, in 130 ABY, when Darth Krayt usurped Emperor Rowan Fel as the leader of a resurgent galactic empire, Krayt knew that Kashyyyk would not support his rule, and that the Wookiees could not be bought off as other planets like Bothaway had been. So Krayt blockaded the world, shifting the considerable local trade going to Kashyyyk over to Trandosha instead, and he also granted Trandosha the right and responsibility to patrol the local area, specifically allowing them to hunt down any Wookiees who broke the blockade in either direction. Unlike Palpatine though, Krayt did not seek to occupy Kashyyyk directly. He believed it would be too costly, and he didn't want to ignite a vendetta within the dangerous Wookiees. The lack of an open invasion made open revolt by the Wookiees a difficult proposal to realize, despite the isolation this left off-world Wookiees in. For Trandosha's part, this was taken as an opportunity to become a significant local power, with the leadership in his score threatening other regional powers like the Hutts and even Hapans with invasion. This seems to be a reflection of overzealousness on the Trandoshans' part, and an overly optimistic view of how much Krayt was willing to support them, rather than a reflection of how much their own military might had actually grown. So these ambitions of local domination likely dissolved alongside Krayt's empire, following Krayt's death in 138 ABY. That, though, brings us to the end of our history of Kashyyyk and Trandosha in the Legends continuity. This was among the most requested planets in the last video in this series on Coruscant, with Corellia being the other big request, so that should be the next one. Special thanks to the patron and members whose support makes these videos possible, as well as to Marmar for editing this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.